Good morning, everyone. This is update for June 6, 2022, day 103 of the war and of the date of date. So first of all, I would like to talk a little bit about those T-62 tanks that we mentioned and we discussed yesterday that were spotted in Kherson region, and they were supposedly going up north into the west to support Russian attack around the Vidiv breed and potentially in the north. So it apparently didn't cause sort of much concern based on the comments from the viewers, because it does kind of look sort of similar to T-64 and sounds like, okay, T-62, T-64, kind of like almost the same thing, right? And it does look like, if you look at this, this is actually T-62 with reactive armor, right? So it does look almost kind of like all of the T-72s and T-64s and, well, not T-80s, but sort of similar to all of the tanks that are being used. But there's a huge difference. It's totally different tank, and all of these things that you see here, this is T-62 without reactive armor, this is with reactive armor, this is Leopard 1 German tank, this is M60 US tank, this is Chieftain, yes, British tank. They're all the same tanks, right, in the essence. This is the same generation of tanks, and the key kind of point of these tanks is that they have homogeneous armor. This is the key difference relative to the current generation of tanks, and we'll see that in the next slide. So all of this, what this means homogeneous, is just simply armor plate of, usually they have 100, like for example in T-62 case it's 100 millimeter thickness. Leopard, I think, is 90 millimeter, something like that. So and the idea, so basically all of this tank can be easily destroyed by the RPGs, right? And there's a huge kind of like choice of RPGs that Soviet army has, and even the weakest one, RPG-18, can easily destroy these tanks. The RPG-18 usually is not capable of destroying T-64 or T-72 or T-80. It can damage severely, and if you shoot it from the rear, you can destroy anything. But if you shoot straight in the frontal projection of the tank, you have close to zero chance of destroying the tank. So with that, basically these tanks are destroyable basically any way you can imagine, easily destroyable, because 100 millimeter armor, it's essentially the same armor as it was late World War II tanks, right? So this is basically tank that was built, all of this generation of tanks was built based on their lessons from World War II and using their basically improved versions of best World War II tanks, essentially. That's the whole point. And the other point, they have relatively thin armor. 100, even it sounds like it's for World War II, it was quite a bit, but for post World War II, it's a thin armor, because most of them are armored with 105 millimeter guns or 115 millimeter guns, in that ballpark, which are much more powerful than smaller caliber guns that were prevailing during World War II. So these guns are much more powerful, obviously, and then the armor is super thin relative to the guns. And the whole sort of philosophical view when these tanks were built, the idea was like, okay, they're not gonna last long on the battlefield, let's just build a swarm of them, and at least some of them will survive. So it's a battle of bigger swarm, right? Whoever has a bigger swarm wins, essentially. So this is kind of like philosophical idea, including this Leopard 1 is the same idea, M60, all of them are built on the same idea. They very extremely expandable, right? And obviously the crew is expandable, along with that. So this hopefully helps to understand that this is hugely different tank. And for that same reason, we think it would be horrible for Ukraine to receive a Leopard 1 from Germany, which doesn't look like it's going to happen anyways. Doesn't look like Ukraine is getting any kind of heavy weapons so far from Germany. So, which is in a way is good thing, because this Leopard 1 is the same as T-62, and both, if sending these things to troops is essentially, criminal thing to do. And let's actually look right now, why it is. Let's actually move to the next generation, current generation, so you understand better why these tanks are different. So this is more modern approach to making armor. As you can see, there is essentially like three layers, right? The first layer of armor, then there is a composite material inside, and then there's another layer of armor. The point of this composite material is to stop hollow charge, or in other words, cumulative projectile, right? I think that's the right English word. So that's what's the purpose of this composite material. So in this case, this is a fiberglass here, this white stuff, right? And there was a lot of experimentation, like what to do, what to use. Each country has its own kind of like a cooking recipe for it, and it's all different. So like England has UK has different, Germany has another one, US something else, and this is more, we're looking at the Soviet Union approach to this. So the first idea was actually to put this ceramic balls inside. So this is like, now if you look at this, is the turret for T-64. So you can see this ceramic balls, right? So effectively what that does, it increases protection, frontal protection, to about 400 to 500 millimeters equivalent of steel. Right, so it's not that amount much steel, but effectively by using this, first of all, three layers, and then this composite materials, which allow to it basically takes all of the energy of the hollow charge. This hollow charge, so basically, essentially dissipating energy from the hollow charge, and that prevents, or hopefully prevents, penetration of the armor. So this is how it's basic, and you can even see here this piece of the turret here as well. You can see how the hollow charge was kind of like going through this composite armor, and it destroyed first ball, and it stopped at the second ball here. Maybe there was another small ball, because some of them it looks like very small. So initially there was the ceramic balls, and T-64 mostly uses ceramic balls. Then there's, as we said, there was a lot of experimentation. This is actually example here, as you can see, is homogeneous armor, right? So there's nothing else, just pure steel, right? There's just steel, nothing else there, and it's just pure steel. So when you make it from pure steel, the whole point of this composite armor is that by using three layers, first of all, and then using some kind of energy absorbing material inside, you making your armor lighter, so the tank is lighter, so it doesn't exceed, let's say, 50 metric ton per tank, because at that, if you exceed that, then basically you lose maneuverability. Then you're creating a lot of engineering issues to, like, you need to use kind of like better materials. So basically the tank becomes much more expensive if you exceed about that range. So anyway, so this is how it looks. Hopefully this, now you can understand when you have 100 millimeters, right? And then now you have equivalent of 400 to 500 millimeters, right? There's a world of difference between the two, right? And then just for you to understand, like RPG 18 can penetrate only 300 millimeters, right? So even if you hit it, if you hit T64, T72 in a frontal projection, you're not going to be able to penetrate 400 or 500 of composite armor. So that's a whole key difference, and let's actually look at this new generation, or well, latest generation. They kind of still old in a way, tanks. So, but this is, if you see here, this is Leopard 2. All of this kind of like a, I don't know how to say, the front, the nose of the turret is essentially some kind of composite armor. Because, like, let's say if we look at the sort of older previous versions of Leopard, you see it's differently placed composite armor, and it's less of it. So there is much more right now to protect from increased power of the shells on the battlefield. So this is probably like some kind of older version of it. But even here you can see there's probably quite a bit of, another layer of composite armor here, and on the sides. So the same idea goes true for Challenger. This is a British tank, and then Abrams, similar idea. So hopefully this helps to understand huge difference between T62 and then T64, T72, and T80, T90 as a totally new generation of tanks. And this is kind of like a key sort of differentiation of tanks. And plus all of these tanks in this group, they have usually like 120 millimeter or 125 millimeter in case of the Soviet tank guns. So it's also a little bit more powerful guns as well. So and then going back to this T62, their declared sort of intent to use them as effectively assault guns to support infantry, as it's becoming probably very clear, more so for the Russian side than Ukrainian side, that infantry lacks, like they need support, like infantry guns, like by some kind of infantry, some kind of gun with like a large caliber gun that's embedded within infantry unit. And this is more acute for the Russian side because they are more on attacking, and they are mostly attacking, and it's not as sort of acute for Ukrainian side because Ukrainian army almost never attacks. It's always on defensive. So you need these assault guns when you attack. So let's say if Russian side is using T62 as assault guns as declared, and as people kind of try to say, as people try to rationalize it, right? If think about this way, first of all, it's only 115 millimeter gun, so it's less powerful gun relative to the regular tank, right? The armor is only 100 millimeter. So as long as this tank approaches, and you need to come close to the enemy, right? You cannot be sort of supporting infantry from 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers, right? So you really need to come to like about a kilometer distance and even probably closer. And then you're easily going to be picked up by any even Soviet, any Soviet RPG, right? So like RPG 18 only shoots for about 150 to 200 meters, so it's not a long distance weapon. But even then, if tank approaches close enough, it's guaranteed death for the tank and probably for the crew. But even RPG 7, which is much more powerful, meaning in terms of distance, which shoots about 700 to 800 meters, can easily pick this up. So hopefully this helps to understand this whole idea about using them as assault guns is total rationalization and totally bogus idea. Doesn't if you use common sense, it's not able to stand up to common sense logic. So, and then there was another idea. Okay, this is just some Ukrainian tanks from Crimea. Okay, it doesn't really matter. Why would you, if you have sort of Russia situation? Okay, we have shortage of people, right? That's what the main constraint on the Russian side. Why would you, actually kill more people, because this T-62 guarantees extremely high death rate, right, among the crews, and a lot of equipment destroyed, and not to mention that it destroys morale of their soldiers, because many soldiers don't really understand this. They're all just conscripts, just mobilized probably whatever, just 1 or 2 months ago, very close to zero training, and they just they see how these tanks are easily destroyed, and this really depresses morale quite a bit. So this whole thing doesn't make sense unless you're really desperate, and that's actually a bigger question. Is it desperation due to the timing issue, in terms of okay, you want to throw something right now at the front line, because let's say you have T-72s in your stock, in inventory, but let's say they're in the Far East, then bringing them to the front line probably will take 2 or 3 weeks. So that's probably more or less sort of more likely explanation. We still don't know for sure. And then there was just question, where is Russian storage facilities for all of this old Soviet T-72s, T-64, T-80s. So it's one of their largest one was in Far East, not far away from Khabarovsk, from Baikal region, somewhere there. So that was we know for sure there was one huge one that's probably for 2,000 or 3,000 tanks there. They're probably somewhere else as well, but they tend to be sort of in non-European part of Russia, basically. So okay, so having discussed that, let's and then there was one more question from another viewer regarding the rocket strikes that hit Kyiv yesterday. So the question was, what was that? And the short answer, the Russian side was destroying military, basically production facility that is able to repair tanks and put reactive armor on the tanks. And that facility specifically was used to put reactive armor on the Polish tanks that Ukraine received recently, because those Polish tanks, and I think Czech tanks, they did not, or Slovak tanks, I don't remember exactly, they did not have reactive armor, right? So they need kind of a little bit refurbishment before they can go to the front line. Many of them already kind of went through that. Some of them already on front line, some being used for the for other brigades that are being formed and so on. So they kind of in all over the place. But basically they hit that production facility, was one of the large remaining military production facilities that Ukraine had, and for obvious reasons Russia wants to destroy it. So hopefully that answers that question. In terms of okay, how much, what was destroyed there, it's a secret information. Really, nobody hasn't, probably some equipment got destroyed there, but exactly we don't know what it is. So now let's go back to the front line. We're gonna do our usual clockwise fashion, starting from the very north. So artillery shelling, or artillery ping pong as we call it, is continuous here in all of these regions, basically Ukrainian regions, Chernihiv region and Sumy region. And then for the Russia, it's Bryansk region here, Kursk region here, and Belgorod region here. So as we discussed many times, Russia just keeps the door open for opportunity to declare war on Ukraine if they choose to do so. Now let's look what's going on east of Kharkiv. Here again, the same situation. Low intensity fighting, Russian troops want to push and create buffer here to push to kind of keep Ukrainian troops from Belgorod and Ukrainian troops trying to get to the state border. So really nothing really changes, and it's really a low intensity fighting. As we said, it's company or less size of units. Now let's keep going. Let's see what's going on at Izyum and Lyman bridgehead. This is high-level overview. This is Izyum bridgehead, and this is Russian mechanized brigades here. This is other Russian units, mostly divisional size, that were used here on this bridgehead, but they suffered heavy losses, and essentially they reduced to battle groups or consolidated units, as we call them. So now let's look, and this is Lyman bridgehead, which was split into pieces. Actual Lyman bridgehead was destroyed, and there is bridgehead around town Svyatohirsk, which essentially actually destroyed as well. So Russian troops got into Svyatohirsk town. There was street fighting, and it's unclear if Ukrainian troops completely left, abandoned this bridgehead, or there's still some small sort of fighting in the forest area. But essentially, that's it. This bridgehead is gone, destroyed, and if not yesterday, then today or tomorrow, it will be completely mopped up. So essentially, this will be gone. It's just a matter of day at most that this will be gone. Russian troops continued attacks on Izyum bridgehead from this village Pasika, as we've seen this for past week. They continue hammering here, and again another place where they hammer is Dovhenke. So that's essentially it, but it's relatively less intense fighting than it used to be. Okay, let's go now to Severodonetsk salient, where there's the most of the action is happening, and where the focus of the Russian troops, even from the fact that Russian general who was commander of the First Army Corps died, kind of tells you where the focus of the Russian command and the Russian forces is. So again, the northern shoulder is quiet. There is fighting in Severodonetsk. We'll touch on that once we get to Severodonetsk, but essentially not really much going on there from a strategic point of view. Then some Russian pressure here in village Ustenivka. They're trying to get to village Mirna Dolina, but no success here. Again, there is a pressure. There was pressure here in Kamyshovaha, and then there was sort of Russian attack and Ukrainian counterattack here around Horivka. Ukrainian side trying to push Russian side back to kind of like as far as possible from this road. This road is not usable regardless of that, because Russian troops essentially 800 meters up to a kilometer away from the road, so it's not usable. It's still unclear what's going on here on the flanks of this penetration, where the Russian troops captured village Nirkove and essentially approached village Mykolaiivka. And where that Russian general, his last name Kutuzov, was killed. And based on our information, this is not 100% verified. He was ambushed by Ukrainian forces. Potential reason that he kind of every situation is dynamic, and his staff kind of drove in his command car in the area where they saw the Russian troops are, and they were not there, and so basically it was kind of mess, and they got killed in the process. Essentially, that's what we're hearing, but this is not 100% verified story. And then there's another piece of it that the body was, which supports this, that the body was recovered by Ukrainian forces of the general. This is just kind of like color to this whole story. But so far today, there were no progress by Russian troops. But as we mentioned, it's a very concerning situation here on the flanks, right? Because Russian troops now can easily pivot and go and sort of attack towards kind of like eastern and northeastern direction, and essentially force withdrawal of all of these troops here. And in the process of withdrawal, we can guarantee that all of the heavy equipment will be abandoned here. It's going to be messy situation. There will be a lot of prisoners of war. It's basically essentially probably 24th Brigade will be out of action for a month or two after this. In the process, if this happens, it's already kind of beaten down quite a bit, but at that point it will be reduced to really tiny, essentially sort of shadow itself, basically. So for that reason, Ukrainian command probably is trying to prevent that. This is clearly dangerous situation for Ukrainian troops, and not to mention that the Russian troops can attack here towards east and force even potentially can encircle if Ukrainian command is not reacting quick enough. But it also makes them closer to this road, that actual remaining logistical artery here. As you can see, this is the road, so it kind of connects here to this road that goes from Bakhmut, goes north, and then it goes through this Verkhnyo-Kamensk, and then it's just, that's how this road goes. So it brings closer Russian troops to this main artery, because if once they get probably within 5 kilometers or less, that's essentially it, and Ukrainian troops will be forced to withdraw. So they don't even need to cut this completely, but they just need to come close enough around this border area that we're showing here. Which is, as you can see, not far away where they need to get. Once they kind of close here, it's essentially it. Then all of this salient will need to be evacuated as soon as possible, or there will be huge losses if this turns into an orderly retreat from there. So this is situation now around Severodonetsk. Actually, let's look at Severodonetsk. This is actually, this is sort of more full picture of this Popasna breakout. So we're showing here southern section of it, which is essentially stable. There's no changes here, and there's not much of sort of effort from the Russian side here on this southern section. In a way, they captured it by luck and by skill of the Wagner mercenaries. Essentially, that's how otherwise they probably wouldn't gotten this part. And then there is a continuous attack here from the 1st Army Corps, which they still hopeful, I guess, to push through and sort of kind of reconnect with the Wagner mercenaries. Another interesting detail that we noticed is that 61st Naval Infantry Brigade, which was west of Donetsk, if you remember, it's being pulled, basically in process of leaving their front line there, and then they are being moved to Popasna area. So, which again, this goal goes back to what we're trying to say is the way right now the way the Russian command is operating is by pulling troops from so-called non-active stretches of the front line, and then they're accumulating them on a very short section of the front line, and they're creating significant advantage on that short section of the front line and attacking there and trying to make penetration. And the goal of the penetration is to make encirclement, right? So this is what they're trying to do here. So far they're not lucky, they're not achieving what they want. And as you can see, they're pulling this 63rd Naval Infantry Brigade from the area where they actually also were doing attacks and were also very active area, but now it's all frozen. So as you can see, if you look at the whole stretch of the front lines from Kharkiv to to Kherson and Kryvyi Rih, it's kind of like getting more sort of frozen. It's like a concrete in a way, right? At first it's liquid and then becomes like hotter and hotter. So everything is getting hotter and hotter. The only sort of moving part is still this Popasna area and essentially a little bit on the Izyum bridgehead. But it's essentially about it. The rest is becoming really frozen. And there's another so this is going back to conversation about like, okay, what's the next step for Russia, right? Next step is mobilization, some kind of in some shape or form, some mobilization because they need more manpower on the front line. So today, I guess it's yesterday, so June 6th, just to make sure. So what they said is like, okay, we're gonna involve troops from our sort of well, you couldn't even say allies. There is sort of like equivalent to NATO that Russia organized from some of the countries of the Soviet Union, which includes Belarus, Kazakhstan, and some other Armenia, and some few more countries in the Central Asia, former Soviet republics. So they want to bring their sort of manpower to continue fighting in Ukraine. So basically, the idea of doing mobilization in Russia is apparently very, very politically bad idea, and the Russian leadership is trying to avoid it at all costs. Our take that both, a mobilization in Russia brings closer 1917 moment for the current Russian for the current Russia. And to be fair, Ukraine is also going towards its own 1917 moment. It's probably sort of further away from it than Russia, but the both countries, if you look like long term strategically, are going to their 1917 moment somewhere. So hopefully this is another helpful piece of information for the viewers. Now let's look at what's going on around Severodonetsk. This was on the first day of attack, May 30th, day 96. So you can see Russian troops just managed to capture a little bit of area here. Then they quickly expanded, and essentially Ukrainian defenses literally collapsed, and Ukrainian troops were retreating without much fighting here. They managed to stop at their this industrial facility, this chemical plant. So then there were reinforcements brought in, and there was a counterattack. So that's the picture of that counterattack where Ukrainian troops how far they managed to move. And now we're actually back to basics. So they essentially retreated towards this industrial facility. We don't know where exactly. So we're kind of showing the same sort of front line. We don't know. It could be a little bit further towards east, but it's essentially somewhere along this sort of original position before this small-scale counterattack. This bridgehead, the goal of this bridgehead is to create a problem for the Russian command in terms of like they have to commit troops here, they cannot sort of refocus on other areas and basically take troops from here and concentrate it there somewhere else, because this is going to be constant threat for the Russian troops, because Ukrainian side can easily bring more troops here and create another counteroffensive from here. So, and then it's very difficult to fight in the industrial area, generally speaking, right? As we know from Azovstal, it helps defenders by its nature, right? In addition, as we mentioned many times, this western bank is about 120 meters to 150 meters above the eastern bank, so you can see very far and very well on their eastern side, and that really helps you with correcting artillery fire, right? So you don't really need UAVs, which Ukrainian troops are severely lacking those UAVs, especially for artillery support and long distance ones. So here you really don't, you can kind of avoid the, you can get by without using those UAVs. And the distance here is about like at most 5 kilometers from here, at most maybe even like 4. So that's excellent, pretty much for artillery fire. It's going to be very precise. You immediately see what you hit. So essentially, kind of like creates firewall here, preventing Russian troops from advancing. Right. So it's potentially could be super difficult to overcome for Russian troops. We're not saying that it's not possible. Anything is possible, and it also depends on the decision of Ukrainian command and Ukrainian troops, because they may not commit enough of artillery pieces, and because let's say there's a pressure in other areas, and as we know, Ukraine doesn't have much artillery, so that's constrained here. But technically you can keep this bridgehead for a long time, essentially. Let's now look. This is just a different map, different look at the same Popasna breakthrough. This Popasna salient. This was June 1st, as we saw. This is Russian expansion. They captured Kamyshevacha on June 2nd. Here Polypchatine, and now they managed to get to outskirts of Mykolaiivka, where they finally stopped. So just a little bit like kind of zoomed in picture of that. Now let's move to area straight west of Donetsk. Let's say relatively quiet in terms of this is artillery shelling, like small, like a squad level skirmishes, basically reconnaissance action, really small scale attacks, nothing true and major here going on. So essentially, this is this 61st Naval Infantry Brigade, which we mentioned is being pulled from here to Popasna area. This is a closer look at this Russian attempt to capture town of Diivka, which is important industrial center for Ukraine. Now let's look at Zaporizhzhia front line. Their situation is very similar. It's being frozen. Really, this is the most sort of Russian advance this wedge that they created a long time ago, and it's been frozen ever since. This is high level look at this front line. Really nothing changes here. Now let's look at Kherson bridgehead here. So all we know that there is a fighting going on here around the Vydiv Brid and this bridgehead that Ukrainian troops captured. Unfortunately, we don't have many more news there. Also, we know that Ukrainian troops trying to attack Snihurivka and destroy Russian bridgehead there. To our understanding, it's without much success. So it's essentially kind of like status quo, right? So, and then Russian troops trying to destroy this bridgehead, attacking towards the Vydiv Brid, and they also attacked area here. But to our understanding, the bridgehead still standing. So really kind of sort of stalemate, I guess we could say, where there's a lot of fighting, losses and everything, but it doesn't lead to any meaningful changes for either side. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow. Bye bye.